ask your question.
Okay. Prabhu, the question I had was, what is the exact definition of a devotee, Prabhu? Why I had this question is, see, we have a Kanishtadhikari, Madhyamadhikari, and Uttamadhikari among devotees. So there are Gyanis. Like, since I was reading about Durvasa, Ambarisha Maharaja in the 9th canto, I was just thinking that who is, a person like Durvasa. I mean, I understand Durvasa was actually a great devotee, and we had discussion yesterday, but he is acting like an impersonalist at that point, or anybody like Durvasa, quote unquote, who is envious of devotees. Is he actually considered as a devotee? Thank you, Prabhu.
So, Mataji, that we understand from the speech or the words spoken by the person. You know, like even though in the pastime of Vamandev, you know, we see Shukracharya is actually opposing. Apparently, he's opposing Bali Maharaj not to give charity to Lord Vamandev, right? But after the whole episode, when Lord Vamandev is asking Shukracharya that, please rectify the faults, whatever faults you think was there in the process of performing yajna for Bali Maharaj. Then Shukracharya speaks a very beautiful words, glorifying the my dear Lord. Wherever the holy name of yours is chanted, all the faults are automatically nullified. So that kind of glorification cannot come from the mouth of a non-devotee. So although Shukracharya was opposing in this case to Bali Maharaj not to give charity to Lord Vamandev, but we still understand that he is a devotee. Because that kind of glorification, that kind of faith in the holy name of Krishna exists only in the Vaishnava.
Okay, so Durvasa Muni is also a devotee, Prabhu. Does he ever glorify Krishna in this whole system?
Yes, definitely. Durvasa Muni is a devotee, and you know, we also understand that from the pastime of that we discussing another day, that Lord Krishna is telling gopis that Durvasa Muni, my guru, had come. So the gopis got impressed that, oh, somebody is your guru, we would like to see him as well. So gopis go to very eagerly see Durvasa Muni, knowing him, you know, because Krishna, he is very dear to Krishna because Krishna accepted him as guru. So therefore they went to see him.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Prabhu. I have another question. I'll put it on the chat, Prabhu. I'll ask later. Thank you, Prabhu.
Sure.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Can I ask question, Prabhuji?
Yes.
Mataji, are you asking continuation question?
No, Mataji.
Can you post your question, Mataji? I saw next question is from Gaurav Prabhu.
Okay, no, Mataji. No problem, Mataji. You can take, Mataji. I will post.
Prabhuji, that question was posted by me actually, because that time Gaurav's mobile was with me. So the question is that what is the real purpose of chanting, Prabhuji? Is it training of mind for the last breath? Because when we hear it so many times, maybe they all are real purpose, but if we can put them in chronological order, that will be helpful. Attentive chanting is meant for training the mind. That is one. Second is to please Krishna. Third is earning pious karma. And
No.
Huh?
Chanting is never done to accumulate pious karma. It's not a pious karma.
So
it's
probably,
in fact
but then
one of the offenses to think chanting to be one of the pious activities from the Vedas.
Yeah. So, but then we say that if you chant these many rounds in Vrindavan, it is counted, number is counted higher, and if you chant on Ekadashi, the effect is higher. So how do we understand this?
So the effect is higher in the sense that purification will be higher.
Okay.
As you said, very first purpose of chanting is Cheto Darpana Marjana. Purify our mind. The mind is polluted, so to purify the mind, the most effective process is chanting the holy name. So the purpose of chanting the holy name is described in the very first verse of Shishashtakam prayer. Cheto darpan marjanam, bhava maha davagni nirvapanam. We want to extinguish the miseries of material existence. So the holy name most effectively does that as well. Shreyava Gairava Chandrika Vitaram. Shreya means that is ultimate good. So Shreyava Kairava Chandrika means the benedicting rays of ultimate good. Ultimate good, not just relative good in this world. So the ultimate good is the living entity going back home, back to Godhead. So benedicting the rays of the ultimate good are being bestowed by the holy name. Shreyava Kairava Chandrika Vitarana and Vidyavadhu Jivana. The knowledge, whatever knowledge we acquire from the reading of scriptures, that knowledge becomes also auspicious and in one way pleasing to the mind. It doesn't become very dry. If a person doesn't have the holy name of Krishna, doesn't chant the holy name of Krishna, the mere study of the scriptures becomes a dry philosophical study. Now, the example actually given in that verse is Vidya Vadhu Jivanam. Vadhu means wife. So Vidya is, the knowledge is actually wife to the holy name. The holy name of Krishna is non-different from Krishna. So that Vidya is actually wife of Krishna. No? Vidya Vadhu Jivanam. Now if there is no husband, the wife is called widow, right? And widow means inauspiciousness. So the knowledge devoid of the holy name is actually inauspicious knowledge. So a person who doesn't chant the holy name of Krishna, the mere knowledge is actually inauspicious. Vidya Vadhu Jivanam. It makes the knowledge very pleasing when a person chants the holy name of Krishna. Vidya Vadhu Jivanam. Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam. It actually keeps increasing the ananda in our life. The joy increases day by day when we chant the holy name of Krishna. The happiness increases day by day by chanting Hare Krishna. When you say happiness, happiness of chanting the holy name, not the happiness in the material sense, that my money will increase, my bank balance will increase, my assets will increase, my wife and children will become very cooperative, everybody will be very happy. No, not that kind of happiness. The happiness which comes by chanting the holy name, it increases every single day when you chant the holy name of Krishna. Vidya Vadhujan, Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam, Pratipadam, Purna Amrita Aswadanam. One can actually experience the real Amrita, not the Amrita that demigods relish, which can only prolong the life duration, but the real Amrita, the real sense of being eternal and eternally servant of Krishna, that comes in simply by chanting the holy name of Krishna. Purnamrita Aswadanam, Sarvatma Snapanam, and the chanting of holy name Krishna satisfies Krishna. Sarvatma Snapanam. Sarvatma is Krishna, and Snapanam means completely satisfied. So it satisfies Krishna. And Sarvatma also means all the living entities. So Sarvatma means all the living entities. If a person chants the holy name of Krishna, all living entities also become very happy and satisfied with him. So this is the glory of the holy name. So these are the purposes why we chant the holy name of Krishna. I hope that answer your questions, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu, properly. But I just thought that it will help me to train the mind by every day if we chant. So it will the mind to get trained.
When you say Chetu Darpana Mahajana means it purifies the mind by training the mind. No?
Because as we say that at the last moment, if you remember gulab jamun, so just a small gulab jamun, but you in your mind for 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes, you can't even concentrate even on gulab jamun. You will have something else or the else will keep coming and keep coming and going, coming and going. So the last moment, remembering the name of Krishna, at that time we will be in immense pain. So sounds very, until unless mercy of Krishna comes, that is something which depends on Krishna, not on us. It just depends absolutely on Krishna. So from our end, we should do what we should do so that mercy of Krishna also arrives. At the same time, we can also train the mind so that in the last moment we can remember him.
So this understanding and realization that remembrance of Krishna will come by the mercy of Krishna only is the qualification by which Krishna becomes very pleased. In fact, the purpose of our chanting every day the holy name of Krishna is to develop this conviction that I cannot remember Krishna by my own efforts. It will be possible only by the mercy of Krishna to remember Krishna. That's a very wonderful, very nice realization. If a person maintains or has that realization by the end of the life, Krishna will definitely manifest himself and then the last moments of his life. And Bhakti Thakur said, we have to put our effort. Our effort is we try to remember Krishna more and more. Like Bhakti Thakur said, if you read Chaitanya Bhagavat 108 times during the lifetime, then at the time of death, Lord Chaitanya will force himself to appear in your mind. So all we need to do is read Chaitanya Bhagavat 108 times in this lifetime. Then Lord Chaitanya will be obliged by the words, by the promise of Srila Bhakti Thakur. He will manifest himself in the heart of a person without fail.
Okay. That's a good idea actually. Start reading Chaitanya Bhagavat every day.
Yeah. So if you read 108 times, you know for rest assured, Lord Chaitanya will appear in the mind of the person. Forget about the time of death. The person will not be able to forget Lord Chaitanya even during lifetime.
Prabhu, the entire Chaitanya Bhagavat?
Sorry,
all
Mataji?
the books? Is it entire Chaitanya Bhagavat, all the books?
Yes, entire Chaitanya Bhagavat. That we have been reading every day.
We have to do it 108 times. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Prabhu, I just wanted to add to that. Can I add that? Add a comment, Prabhu?
Sure, Mataji, please go ahead.
So Sachidanand Maharaj, when he was here, he was saying that, when you chant, automatically the mind will be under control. There is no question. But then he was saying that we don't chant because that I want to control my mind. You chant because you want to love Krishna and you want to connect with Krishna. But there are a lot of other things, and one of the very simple, very tucha little thing that will happen is controlling the mind. So he was saying in that way. So I just wanted to add that, Prabhu. Yeah, mind will be controlled, but that is not the purpose of doing chanting, is to connect to Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you for sharing.
So yes, so chanting every day is a necessity. You cannot just say excuse everyday chanting at any cost.
No, you cannot exclude it.
Okay. Those certain situations where you are not well, and like suppose at the
That's
last
understandable.
moment.
That's understandable.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Prabhu. Shinkita Mataji, you can ask your question.
Sure. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dandvat Pranam. Prabhuji, it is said that every action must be performed in Krishna consciousness. So my question is, how could going on vacation be a Krishna conscious activity?
How going on vacation could be Krishna conscious activity? As long as we continue our sadhana during vacation also, that means chanting at least 16 rounds of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, And if you are going on vacation with the family or with the friends, then if the friends happen to be devotee friends, then definitely you can have a lot of Krishna conscious games. But if not, if you are going with the family members who may not be devotees, make sure at least you do minimum sadhana every day. Not to miss the sadhana every day. Yeah?
Rejuvenation is an important part.
So yes, I mean picnics or going on the vacation with the family and friends could be actually a very important part of our what do you call recreation, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Yukta Ahara Viharas Yukta Cheshtas Karmasu Yukta Sapna Bodhasya Yogo Bhavati Dukkha. So if possible, if we have the recreation with devotees, that is best. But if not, we are going with our relatives or other friends who may not be Krishna conscious or devotees, then at least make sure that you do your minimum sadhana every day.
Okay, Prabhuji. Just a small follow-up. So, do we accumulate any karma by that?
As long as we don't transgress the 4 regular principles, we won't accumulate any karma.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Mataji. Radhakund Devidasi Mataji, please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dhanyavad Pranam, Jai Shri Prabhupada. I couldn't see you, Prabhuji, I don't know somehow, but I am asking a question. Prabhuji, actually, Arjuna, Bhima, Yudhishthira, Dharmaraj, all these devotees are eternal associates of Lord, and when they are done with the mission on the earthly planet, they go back to the Lord, right? So, how about Duryodhan and Dhritarashtra and Dushashan, who are against Lord on his pastimes on the earthly planet? Do they also go back to Godhead once they are done with the pastime, or because it is not clearly mentioned in the Bhagavatam when how they were leaving their bodies? Like it looks like they are leaving their bodies with different yoga systems, like Dhritarashtra ultimately with the fire burns him or something like that. So it is not mentioned there that they gone back to Godhead or no. So can you please explain?
One thing is, a person who is inimical towards the Vaishnavas cannot go back to Godhead.
Okay.
A person who is inimical towards Krishna or his devotees cannot enter into the spiritual, Vaikuntha planets. Now, so therefore, Duryodhan, there's no question of going back to Godhead because he was so inimical towards Vaishnavas, the Pandavas. He went to heavenly planets because of leaving his body on the battlefield. But a Kshatriya to die on the battlefield ensures his entrance into the heavenly planets. So Duryodhan, Dushasana, all of them, because they died on the battlefield, fighting, not showing their back, but dying on the battlefield. Or they entered into the heavenly planets.
So how about the Dhritarashtra also must have gone to Dhritarashtra? Finally realized, right, by Vidura taught him.
Dhritarashtra entered into impersonal Brahmajyoti. This is explained by Srila Prabhupada in the purports. That Dhritarashtra, because he was inimical towards Pandavas, though he took to the path of yoga, under the guidance of Vidura, but because he had inimical attitude towards Krishna and his devotees, he could not enter into this Vaikuntha planets. He attained impersonal liberation.
Okay. So how about the soldiers? It is written they because they are died in front of Krishna, they all got liberation. So what kind of liberation they got, Prabhuji?
They all attained Sarupya Mukti.
Sarupya means
they all entered into the Vaikuntha Loka because they were looking at Krishna while leaving their body. So they were meditating on the form of Krishna. Therefore, they attained the spiritual planets. They went to Vaikuntha.
So it is very surprising. They are more fortunate than Dhritarashtra and Duryodhan because
Definitely. Definitely, they are more fortunate because they didn't have inimical attitude towards Krishna. They were simply fighting because they had to fight on somebody's side. They were servants of, just like, Bhishma. He's not the king. He's simply subservient to King Dhritarashtra. And yet he is Mahabhagavat. So similarly, the soldiers who were on the side of Duryodhan also, when they died on the battlefield of Kurukshetra looking at the face of Krishna, because they didn't have inimical attitude towards Krishna. They were simply fighting on the side of Duryodhan, but they didn't have any inimical feeling towards Pandavas or Krishna. Therefore, they went back home, back to God.
Okay. So Prabhuji, then ultimately they are also participating in the Krishna's plan, right? Everybody, even though they're inimical or they're affectionate towards God, but still they are part of the mission of the Lord, right? Duryodhan and Dusas and all these persons. I mean,
Krishna accommodates everything and everyone in his plan.
okay.
But that doesn't mean that if somebody is inimical towards Krishna, that is also because of Krishna's will. No. Krishna doesn't want anyone to be inimical towards not only him, but or any living entity. What to speak of becoming inimical towards the devotees or to Krishna? Krishna doesn't want us to be inimical towards anyone.
But Prabhuji, if they are not inimical, then there is no Kurukshetra battle, right? Somebody has to be inimical to fight. That has to happen, and also Krishna has to teach Bhagavad Gita. Means somebody has to be inimical, right? I mean,
not that somebody has to be inimical. In Parthasarthi Lok, there are no enemies, but Krishna is speaking Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna eternally, since time immemorial.
okay.
Eternity, Krishna is speaking Bhagavad Gita. Bhishmadev asks question, Arjuna is asking question, and that goes on eternally. It's not that somebody has to be inimical, because living entities are inimical in the material world. Therefore, that creates like a dark background for Krishna's pastimes.
Oh, okay. So this is not only the situation, right? I mean, there might be different situations where there were not people inimical, but still Krishna teaches Bhagavad Gita, right? Oh.
Like Krishna says also in 4th chapter of Bhagavad, right? Imam vivasvate yogam kruptavan. I spoke the same message of Bhagavad Gita to sun god Vivaswan.
Yes,
doesn't mean that Krishna spoke on the battlefield. There were enemies of Vivaswan, sun god, and Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita. No.
Oh, okay, okay.
So Krishna doesn't have to speak Bhagavad Gita only when there are somebody inimical towards Vaishnavas.
Okay. Yeah.
So people or living entities exhibit their enmity because of their conditioning by the modes of material nature. So Duryodhan, Dhritarashtra, Dushasana, they were all inimical towards Pandavas because of their conditioning by the three modes of material nature. It's not that it was necessary for them for performing the pastimes. No.
Oh. Yeah, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Very, very nicely explained, Prabhuji. Beautifully explained. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, follow that. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhuji, follow to that. In Prabhupada, in one of his letter, he mentioned that the Pandavas are not in spiritual world. They are in this material world only, and they are they are associating Krishna in different lokas, in different Brahmandas. Prabhupada mentioned in his letter, Prabhuji. I posted in the group once.
Thank you very much, Madhavi. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, but here Madhavi's question was, that somebody has to be inimical for the Krishna to take place, but that's not the case.
Vinita Mataji, you can ask your question.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandat Pranam. Prabhuji, my question is that before entering this material world, what was the position of soul? We always say that we all are in Golok Vrindavan with Krishna, we are serving to Krishna. So we were jealous and we want to control like Krishna, so that Krishna sent us to in this material world. So means our actual Swarupa is with Krishna. But in Bhagavad Puran and in every means conversation also we say that the person who worship to whom he will attend that loka only. Suppose someone is worshipping Vishnu, he will attend Vaikuntha, and there are so many Vaikunthas are in the spiritual world. So how can to understand when their original Swarupa is in Goloka, and if they are attending different Vaikunthas, how will they get their Swarupa?
No, I didn't get your question. Could you repeat the question?
Okay. We say that before coming to this material world, we all souls were serving to Krishna in Golok Vrindavan.
Mm-hmm.
But in Bhagavatam and in our conversation, we always say that who will perform on whom, he worship or whom, he will attend that loka. Suppose someone is performing on Venkatesh, on Balaji, or in a Pradyumna form, he will attend that loka. So, but when we left our original Swarupa in Goloka, how we will attend that same Swarupa in other Vaikunthas?
Mataji, it's not that everybody was in Golok Vrindavan before they came to the material world. The living entities come from different places, and we don't know from where they came. Everybody has their original Swarupa in the spiritual world, and when they become purified, they will go and attain the same Swarupa only.
So, in every pastime means souls were jealous to God, Supreme Personality.
Yes.
Okay. That's not clear.
Devi Sakhi Mataji, you can go ahead your question with your
Thank you, Prabhu.
So Devi Sakhi Mataji, are you there?
Yes, Mataji. Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam Jai Srila Prabhupada. Prabhuji, today we were reading about how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu pointed out the faults as well as the good points in Keshav Kashmiri's composition, in which one of the point was Bhavani Bhartu. He was saying, so in the shloka in text 41, Keshav Kashmiri has composed the glorification of Ganges river. So Bhavani Bhartu means Lord Shiva. So just like Radhika Raman, we use for Krishna. So and we have also read in different purports in scriptures that Lord is pleased when we call him like that, like Yashoda Nandana, Radhika Ramana, like that, when we associate him with the devotees. And so here in his composition he is mentioning Bhavani Bhartu. So which anybody can understand that it is Shiva, but why was it pointed out, like the example was given, husband of the wife of the Brahmana, but I didn't find that kind of thing. So I need to understand what was the error, Prabhu, and different other errors were pointed out. I want to understand those also.
The word Bhava means Lord Shiva, and Bhavani means wife of Lord Shiva. The wife of Bhava is called Bhavani. So when you say Bhavani Bhartur means becomes the husband of the wife of Bhava, which is contradictory. The word Bhava actually refers to Lord Shiva, and Bhavani means wife of Lord Shiva. Okay, so when you say Bhavani Bhartu, Bhartu means again husband. So it becomes husband of the wife of Lord Shiva. That's not an appropriate way to indicate mother to Lord Shiva.
So Bhavani, Prabhuji, that means Bhavani is not actually a name, but it is a derivative of the word from
Bhava.
Lord Shiva.
Yes, Bhava is Lord Shiva, and Bhavani means wife of Bhava. She is called Bhavani.
Okay, got it, Prabhu.
Okay, so Bhavani Bhartur means become husband of the wife of Lord Shiva. That is, becomes offensive and contradictory meaning.
Yes, Prabhu, I understood now what is the error there. And also there were other errors, Prabhuji. Is it okay? Is it a good thing to discuss that, Prabhu? How to understand them?
Yes. So, twice there was a Avideya with avrishta vidyamsha. Prabhupada explained vimrishta means pure or clean, and avrishta means unclean. So when the composition is unclean, and Prabhupada actually gave a beautiful explanation, the 2 times the explanation, Prabhupada actually quoted also some English sentence in there. You say this man is learned, that's a proper composition. But if you say the learned is this man, doesn't seem right, right? Grammatical doesn't seem right. So similarly, in Sanskrit also there's a grammatical rule. The known subject matter should be first introduced and unknown should come later. So when you're saying that glories of Mother Ganga, so glories, when you're talking about glories of Mother Ganga, so the glories are actually the known and sorry, I forget. There are 2 instances, right?
Yeah, known subject and unknown subject he mentioned.
So unknown subject being put before is actually considered the fault. You should not introduce unknown subject before the known. First you introduce the known and then you introduce the unknown subject. So like, Prabhupada gives example, this man is learned. So this man is known subject, right? And learning or the person being learned is unknown. So if I say this man, so okay, so I understand this man. But learned is the quality of the man which is not known to me. So when I say this man is learned, so I understand, okay, so this man has the quality of being learned. But if I say the learned what? Who's learned? We say the learned is this man. That's an improper composition. So similarly, Mother Ganga shines brilliantly. Vibhavati. So Ganga is a known subject matter and Vibhavati is the shining or brilliantly shining is unknown subject matter. So the unknown should always be placed after the known. So that is called Avrishta Vidyamsha, and that was repeated twice in 2 instances. So that kind of composition makes it faulty. The composition becomes faulty in Sanskrit. In English, sometimes, when they make the poetry, they may even have the improper English and people don't mind, they still accept it as poetry. But in Sanskrit, the strict grammatical rules don't allow such composition. The meaning becomes